I was considering about the Buddha and art, the Buddha and creativity and artistic activity. That nowadays we regard artistic activity as being very important. So what part did that play in the Buddha's life?
It doesn't seem to have played any part at all.
Oh. But
as far as we know, the Buddha didn't have pictures to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So far as we know, the Buddha didn't have poetry to read. In any case, he couldn't read. There were no doubt ballads and things of that sort, and he might even have heard some Vedic verses, some of which are quite fine poetry. But certainly the arts as such, as we know them.
There were paintbrushes and things like that.
Well, people certainly whitewashed, the walls of their villas and things of that sort. And there are references in the Pali Canon itself to I believe, monks' cells being sometimes decorated. But there aren't any extensive references to the fine arts. Perhaps to music. Perhaps music was more developed than any of the other fine arts. So I doubt if the fine arts played a very prominent part in the Buddha's life, whether before or after his enlightenment. One could, of course, say that they played a part in principle. Some of his disciples seem to have been appreciative of the beauties of nature. The Buddha himself seems to have had some appreciation of the beauties of nature. So he wasn't without aesthetic sense.
Right.
But that aesthetic sense, in a manner of speaking, could not have been very highly developed, simply because the fine arts in his day were not very highly developed.
What about language and literature, poetry and things like that?
There was no literature, of course, in the literal sense. There were only oral traditions. And the Buddha must have had some acquaintance with them. But his acquaintance with those old traditions would bear no comparison to our acquaintance, let us say, with literature.
So in what way did creativity play part of
Well, I think one must say what one means by creativity, because this term is used so loosely. One has even creative cookery. One has creative absolutely everything these days. There's nothing that's not creative, or possibly creative, so that in a way the term loses its significance. Well, presumably this is a creative interview, and you're asking me creative questions, and I'm giving creative replies, and all the various technicalities which are going on at the moment are all going on in a highly creative way, I assume. So one has to say what one means by creative, before asking what place creativity had in the Buddha's life. I become very suspicious when I hear something labelled as creative. I can't help feeling nowadays, in view of the way that the word creative is used, that if something is described as creative, well, it's a bit phony. There's something a bit suspicious going on, and it needs looking into.
So if you were going to redefine creative, looking at the Buddha's life, in what way would you redefine it? I
think I'd like to drop the term creative altogether by this time, because, as I said, one does hear it bandied about so much. One has got rather tired of this word creative. It seems to have lost any value. No doubt it did have value once upon a time, but it seems to have become quite evacuated of meaning. So I personally rather drop this word creative altogether. It's one of those tired old words that I refer to in my poem. What's the title of that poem?
I'm not sure.
I think it's the New Man. The old world words are so tired. Soiled, stained, useless. It's one of those words. It's a tired old word. So I think we ought to allow it to retire gracefully and die.